What is up, homies? Welcome back to another review from Heroes Reforged. We are going to be talking about Chloe Zhao's Eternals. We got to see it a little bit early. We will be starting the discussion with a non-spoiler segment, so don't worry if you haven't seen the movie yet. It's all good. We won't spoil it for you. We will let you know when we switch over to spoilers. But before we get into a review, I want to let you know that we have merch. We're currently selling our Heroes Reforged t-shirt. Links down in the description. Also, check us out on Patreon. We've got a lot of exclusive reactions. We are just starting Squid Games. A lot of people seemed very excited about us doing that show. Outside of that, we just launched the first episode of Chexicans, our brand new podcast. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, wherever most podcasts are sold. Check that out. Check out the video. We had a really good time reuniting for the first time in 2 years.
We got our next episode is also going to be a Patreon exclusive. So that's another reason to join the Patreon. It's going to be just like pretty much a straight up Q&A, Adam, like just answering questions that people, things that people want us to talk about.
Time. It's just going to be a good time. I'm going to be answering Patreon exclusive questions. So if you want to ask a question, go to the Patreon, ask a question, and maybe we'll talk about it on the podcast.
And it will be in person. It will be in person. Don't worry.
It will be in this. Now people might recognize the set. Podcast.
So let's get into Eternals. Like we said, non-spoiler stuff. Hector, you got to go to the premiere. You got to like have the coolest Eternals experience. But what was the experience like of watching the movie?
I absolutely did. And a couple things you got to know about me that I will flat out admit up front is that this is my favorite franchise. The MCU is my favorite movie franchise of all time. So yes, I am a fan. I'm already kind of a built-in fan. And it was a really cool experience to go to the premiere. But even through all of that, those kinds of experiences, hopefully they don't kind of, make you, I guess, more, hopefully they don't just make you love the movie. If you had seen the movie in another context, you wouldn't love it the same. I think I'm good on Eternals because it's not my favorite Marvel movie, but it still blew me away in a lot of ways. And I want to talk about it. And there's a bunch of stuff to talk about with specifics, but ultimately for me, and I went with Abby and we both got to see it early. And Abby, I think, liked it less than I did because she was also hung up on some like premise, like the basic premise of the movie, which is totally fair. But I remember her explaining it to me and I was kind of like, that's just comic book shit. Like I was like, that is a comic book Marvel trope that we'll get into that it didn't even register with me. Like I didn't even clock it. So for me, I really enjoyed the movie. I loved characters. I loved moments. And I loved the differences that it has from other Marvel movies. I think that that's its strength, is the way that it's different from other MCU movies. The same way that like Shang-Chi, what did it bring to the table? Because we've seen MCU movies with heroes and a hero's journey, and then they fight a villain. And, these are movies that have formulas because they are based on Marvel Comics, and Marvel Comics have formulas, and that's all good. But Shang-Chi brought that, like, Augustine, like you said, that Kung Fu was not whack. So that was
whack
dope.
At all, baby. Yeah.
And what does Eternals bring? I think Eternals brings some intimacy and closeness and like emotion to the MCU that we normally don't get. And I really love the pace of the movie, but it is like long, and it didn't feel long, but it did feel like we went through 10 different characters' stories. You know what I mean? It's a big epic movie. And at the end of it, I was extremely satisfied and really blown away at parts, and also felt like it almost could have done more to be included in the MCU. There's some stuff that I didn't love about the movie, then I think that's honestly one of them. And it's weird to say that because it's like everyone's like, these movies, they can't be too overly connected, which is true. But I almost think like there was almost a hesitance to be connected to the larger MCU because it wanted to set itself apart. That I was like, if this was another sci-fi movie on its own, there would be other stuff we'd be seeing, but it's almost like we're not seeing it because the Marvel Cinematic Universe is like, well, we're going to show you that later. And they will deliver. There's no worry that like, oh, we're never going to get a sequel to this. Like, we'll see a sequel probably, and we'll see these characters in like all of that stuff is going to happen. So some people were saying, I saw online that they were like, a lot of how I feel about Eternals depends on like what they're going to do with Eternals Part 2 or what they're going to do, later, which is kind of unfair to that singular movie. And I agree. It's like, that is a weird feeling to be like, oh, this was great, but how I feel about this, it's like, where are these characters going to go? Where's the story going to go? I'll tell you my ranking too. It cracked my top 10. It came in right number 10, under Shang-Chi, but above like Black Widow and a lot of the MCU shows this year. But I still think Shang-Chi was just like a more fun movie going experience. So I loved it. But Eternals cracked that top 10. You know, it's coming in at number 10, which is to me upper mid tier or lower high tier.
Lower
like
it's lower elite tier.
It's lower elite tier Marvel. And also side note too, however I feel about the end product coming all together, I am enamored with this cast. I think that Salma Hayek, Angelina Jolie, Gemma Chan, this cast is amazing. And I really love the director. So I'm big fans of everybody who worked on the movie. I can't wait to talk about it with you guys because we're not recording this the night you saw it. You guys were like, I need some time to process my thoughts. So initially, Adam, you texted me and you were like, I don't know how I feel about it. Maybe I'm somewhere in the middle with it, kind of, halfway on it. And Augustine, you said a real interesting thing where you were like, I didn't love it, but I don't believe that it's deserving of some of the criticism that you're seeing. So that's interesting too. So I want to crack your heads open, boys. How did you feel about Eternals? Where are you at? I want to suck on that brain juice. What are you thinking? Mwah, give it to me.
My initial thoughts when the movie ended. Well, first of all, that end credit scene got spoiled for me completely, but we're not going to talk about that yet. My initial thoughts when that movie was ending, and even as the movie was kind of playing through, I'm thinking, this is very dense. This material is very expansive. It has the potential to take us to a part of the MCU that we've never really seen before, things like the Celestials and the beginning of time and all that sort of stuff. And I love that premise. I think it's such an interesting premise to see how the MCU was sprinkled in throughout time. I think for me, the big thing that I had a little bit of tough time with some of the editing and some of the pacing of the way things happen. I don't consider this a spoiler, but there's a lot of jumping back and forth between time. And sometimes it was a nice pause and a nice break from things that were happening in the movie. And sometimes it felt a little bit too distracting for me. So the thing that I definitely think that is worth giving credit to this movie is the scale and the scope of the movie. I think it's so big. And it's probably like one of the biggest scale movies that that Marvel Studios has done since the last two Avengers movies. And I think for an origin story, that's pretty ambitious to do a movie that introduces 10 new characters on top of introducing the Deviants, on top of introducing Celestials, on top of introducing any sort of like supporting side character into the story. So I think it's a very ambitious film in that regard. And it was weird too, because Augustine and I had seen Dune like 3-4 days ago. I forget exactly when it was. And I think both of those movies are so big and expansive and are doing very big, ambitious things. And I couldn't help but walk out of Eternals and think, man, I'm a little bummed that they either didn't make the movie longer or they didn't just say, you know what, let's split this story in half, somehow recalibrating the second half of the movie into its own, into like a sequel. I think had I had that opportunity to maybe live with the movie a little bit more, and that's already asking a lot because the movie, like you said, Hector, it really breathes and it lets you spend time with the characters, but I think it focuses on certain characters way more than others. And I feel like some characters I still don't really know who they are. And of course, like in sequels, we can develop all those things. But at that point, I'm like, well, then maybe you should have just cut the roster to like 5 and save the other 5 for the next movie. The one big thing for me that I thought was really, really cool, I think that the pandemic, despite all of the negative things that have come from it, the one positive thing that this movie benefited from was the visual effects. It is probably one of Marvel's best looking films. Like the visual effects were so damn good. Yeah. I was really, really impressed. And I think it was really important for this movie to look good because it is going through so much time and it's so many characters. Like we see some power sets that we've seen little bits of in other movies and other superhero movies. And this was really impressive, like really, really impressive. So I think,
dude, Ikarus flew and it was like, this doesn't remind me of Superman, but it just felt right.
Yeah.
And with his
Makkari
vision
was a
or
huge one for me.
Yeah.
I think the use of her power set was so freaking cool. And I think that's also like part of it also goes like into some of my like things that I wasn't so crazy about is some of the characters, they had power sets that I felt didn't really benefit the team too much. And on paper, they were kind of pushed off to the side and they were only brought in for like very specific things. And I'm like, that kind of works. But I think like the Ninja Turtles, they all have very specific characteristics. They all have very specific kind of jobs on the team. But when they're fighting the Foot Clan or whoever it is, they're all fighting together. And I feel like these characters kind of were like off doing too many different things. But aside from that, like, again, I think the scope is commendable. I think doing an origin story of this scale and scope was really, really cool. But I think the first third of the movie, the editing is really kind of like fast paced and then slow, fast paced and then slow. I feel like the second act of the movie where we're spending a lot of time with the family, those were my favorite moments. And that's where like people like Kumail Nanjiani really got to shine. Where in the first third of the movie, I'm like, there's nothing really happening with this character. But then from there on, I was like, yes. So I was hoping that we get more of that throughout.
Isn't that interesting? Like earlier this year, Black Widow, a scene that was maybe trying to get cut, but like people were fighting for it. Black Widow, the dinner scene. And it's the best scene in the movie. And same sort of thing with this. Once you have these characters and these actors actually sitting in a place or talking to each other or interacting, you're like, this is great. I could watch all of this, you know, because Marvel's really good at that.
There's this little part of me that thinks maybe this would have been better as a Disney Plus show because we would have had more time with these characters. At the same time, we would not have gotten this scale, or maybe we would have. I don't know, because they're investing a lot of money into those Disney Plus shows. So I have like mixed feelings about the movie. I definitely don't dislike the movie. I didn't walk out of it with the same satisfaction as I did walking out of Shang-Chi, which is crazy because that was just 2 months ago. But I think there's like a lot of ambition and there's a lot of really cool ideas that are all over the screen, and it's a visual treat in my opinion.
We got to see it in IMAX too.
Yeah.
So
we saw it in IMAX, which was really, really cool. Which is how I would recommend it.
I think it's not an unfair thing to say that this movie bit off maybe more than it could chew, you know, because again, we're commending the bite. We're like, that's a big bite. That's what we want to see these movies do, is take big old bites and big swings. And I've seen how not every one of the decisions in this film has like hit with everybody. So, and I think that the stuff that did hit with me is because of me being a huge Marvel fan, me having a little familiarity with the comics versions of the characters. They're still very, very different, but I'm still like, I
have no clue. I don't know anything about the Eternals before this movie.
But it's not like you should have to read a comic book to get a movie. That's not what it is. I'm just like,
I is to give you all the context you need.
I just enjoyed it, and I'll tell you why when we get to the spoiler thing, the specific calling upon my comic knowledge. Augustine, hit me with it, man. How did you feel about the movie?
Hit me with your best shot.
I'm in the same boat as Adam. One really strong aspect of this movie that I absolutely loved was the visual language that Chloe Zhao set up for this whole movie. The whole world felt authentic and lived in, and like that these characters could exist in a place like this. Some of the scenes where, like, I felt really sad in some of the scenes that were back in time, and I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm seeing things happen that maybe I shouldn't, but like the visual language was set up so well and the VFX were done so well that I really felt some of those things. And so I think she set up such a great world, like the way the power sets were presented, the way some of the backdrops and backgrounds and environments were presented, they were just absolutely immaculate. And Adam's 100% right. The VFX were top tier, as good as I've seen in the past 10 years. It's just,
especially because we just came from watching Dune,
right?
And those visual effects are astounding.
1,000% astounding. Those visual effects were great, and we also saw Dune in IMAX as well. So it was like an apples to apples comparison here, and they were right on par with each other. But the other thing that I think suffered a little bit from this movie is that biting off more than you can chew. The scope of this story is so huge. It made it really difficult. As good as a storyteller that Chloe Zhao is, it's very difficult to present 10 new characters and like all of these things happening and make it work. And it did suffer a little bit in a bit of the storytelling. There were a few characters that I cared little to nothing about. There was a lot of characters that I really, really liked as well. And so I want to commend and not gloss over the fact that she did it, and that like she presented it in one movie in a cohesive way. And that in itself is an achievement, to be able to tell a story in such a huge scope and be able to tell it so clearly. It was a long movie, granted, but I feel like she gave us time to breathe with some characters. She gave us time to really kind of like try to dive into some characters, and it worked sometimes, and sometimes it didn't work. But overall, like I said, like you said earlier, Hector, I don't think it deserves the hate that it's getting from some of the critics, because it's not a cookie cutter Marvel movie. It's not anything that we've seen in the MCU before. And that's what I love about it, because it doesn't feel like a Winter Soldier. It doesn't feel like, looking back at all the Captain America movies, they all feel like they're all cut from the same cloth. This is new. This is different. This is not your grandma's MCU, basically. So, yeah, I think that this is why I needed some time to really mull it over, because some of the things didn't work for me, but other things worked really, really well for me that we'll get into the spoilers about. That I feel like this movie is still very middle of the road MCU, but the backlash is getting, I think it's very unfair, because people expect something from the MCU. They expect whatever they've been getting for the past 10 years, and each person experiences it very differently. So it's impossible to say what. But I feel like, Adam, I didn't walk out of that movie jumping and cheering for any of the characters, but in the movie, I did jump and cheer for some of the characters when some of the things happened. So, but I feel like it's spoiler time, so we can get into some spoilers.
Before we get to spoilers, regardless of how we feel, I feel like everyone who is a fan of the MCU and has been following the MCU for all these years, you should go see this movie regardless of what any critic says. Because I always feel disheartened when I go on Twitter and people are constantly like trying to find out what's the Rotten Tomatoes score, what are the critics saying. I feel like and this goes for any movie, regardless if it's the MCU or if it's DC, Star Wars, whatever. If you really want to experience a movie, just go see it for yourself, formulate your own opinion, and let it sit with you and see how you feel.
Especially if there are folks who, which I don't think are really going to be watching our stuff, but folks who are like casual Marvel movie fans who do look for like, well, what are the critics saying? Oh, it's got that Rotten Tomatoes percentage. I'm going to skip it. It's like, you know what? Go see this one, because maybe this is the one that's like, this is the one you've been waiting for. Maybe this is going to jive with you really, really well. You know, you're not interested in Ant-Man or Spider-Man or any of the mans, but then you get to Eternals, and because it's different enough, you might go like, this is my shit. This is my shit. So, especially if you're casual, but I don't think we've got any casual fans watching our stuff, you guys. I think we have people who watch it all. I want to get into some specifics with the spoilers real quick. In terms of the visual effects, I have to call out the scene where Ikarus was fighting this deviant, and it's a fight, and this deviant's a big CG creature, but the deviant kept pinning down Ikarus's face as he kept trying to get up, and I was like, how did they do this? It was in the jungle. I was like, how did they, the kind of blending of, now the clip that they keep sharing was like the opening 5 minutes of the movie when they first arrived on Earth, kind of a thing, and they were fighting these deviants and protecting like early man. Isn't the most visually impressive. It's all very kind of tan, and that like tan landscape. I forget where they were, just desert. But like every one of the fights with the deviants, in whether it was the modern time or anytime they showed up, or like in the Amazon jungle, I was really impressed with how they were blending the interactivity with the environment, you know, and Ikarus fighting him. All of the fights felt like they were not choreographed and staged, but more like they were like rough and tumble, random brawls, like a real random thing that's happening. And I'm like, they had to CG every frame of this. It's crazy how they were able to pull that off. So I love that for the visual effects.
I thought the fight with Makkari and Ikarus at the end, showing her, you know, charging him and
the abilities,
that stuff, even though a lot of it is obviously CG, it feels like it has real weight to it, which I thought was really cool.
I actually enjoyed her power set more than Ikarus and Thena's power set, because they were supposed to be the action brawler kind of like choreographed fight kind of people, but watching her just dash around and the way they conveyed the speed without using any like time lapse, slow down, slow-mo or anything like that, I think was great. I think it was a really great call, because I really felt the power behind, especially in that one scene where she just clobbers Ikarus into the mountain. Great,
that was
great
awesome.
Great use of those powers.
That was really awesome. I love that moment where I forget who tells Makkari, where they were like, go find the Celestial, and she's already like on another part of the planet. God, it was so cool. Okay, I think the easiest way we can do this is if we go through the characters one at a time. There's 10 characters, and the way they split them up is 5 of them are like fighters, and the other 5 of them are like mental or kind of builders. So let's do the fighters first.
Support characters. They're support characters.
They're support characters. You have Thena, Angelina Jolie. I thought she was fantastic. I thought this was an interesting character, but it's very surface level. Could they go more places later? Yes. And I think that it is interesting that she survived. And so we may see Thena again, conceivably, in like an Eternals, sequel.
To be honest,
what do you guys think of Thena?
She's the one character for me that I was like, why is Angelina Jolie in this movie?
Exactly. Why did they choose Angelina for this role?
Yeah, she's not doing much, but some of what her story requires is kind of a big deal. And I felt like shouldn't we be spending more time with her and understanding exactly what's happening? And then we do understand what's happening, but it's still kind of like murky water. I don't know. I feel like I need to spend a little bit more time with that character.
Like you guys were saying earlier, not all of his characters in this film are treated equal with the same sort of running time. And the Thena Gilgamesh pairing is like, we got to see these characters maybe the least, and they were sort of steeped in tragedy. And I was sad when Gilgamesh died, but I was also like, I mean, I was sad when any of the characters died, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But I was very like, it's just very interesting to try to figure out, again, when we learned how they made Infinity War and Endgame and the deliberation they went through to be like, which characters are getting dusted and which characters are surviving. I feel like the same sort of thing was happening here, story-wise. They're like, who can we afford to lose, and who do we need to hold on to forever? Thena she was in this movie surface level. I thought Angelina Jolie did a fantastic job, and I think that it was Thena's almost like Wonder Woman. She's literally Athena in mythology. And I feel like 20 years ago, Angelina could have played Wonder Woman in a movie. 10 years ago, she could have like that. It's a similar like type of character for me. This stoic, amazing warrior. Gilgamesh, I thought he was super cool. Would have liked to have seen more of him, but really like funny, loyal, like it wasn't a romantic relarelationship, but maybe it was. Like, I just like that vagueness of some of these characters' pairings.
I identified with Gilgamesh the most. He's a thick boy, loves to cook, has a great sense of humor. Like his power set is just there's no bullshit with this power set.
He's a defender, attacker. He's great.
And he's gonna punch you until you're pulverized. There's no he's the earthbender of the group.
Okay, so then next up we have maybe my favorite character in the movie, Kingo. Kingo was so funny. And after the movie, Abby said nobody but Kumail could have played this character because he was like a movie star dickhead, but still so funny and likable and like charming, and like it's
the
Kumail.
Only other person who comes close is our boy Paul Rudd. Like, he was giving me mad Paul Rudd energy, just like stealing the scene every time. Impossibly handsome this man is. Like, when he was up on screen as the Bollywood dancer, I was like, how is this guy so handsome? I turned to my wife, I was like, he's handsome. It was just weird. It was just like, and I really enjoyed everything that they portrayed with him. I love his sidekick. It's just
when he thanked the Eternals, knowing that the world was probably going to end, and he was just like, "It's been an honor. Like, thank you." I was like, he represents the best of humanity. Yeah. Just like Phastos' son, Phastos' family changed Phastos' mind.
Yeah.
Just because here's the other thing. Abby had a problem with the premise, which is these aliens come to this planet, they spend thousands of years and potentially eons before coming to Earth doing the same shit everywhere else. Spoiler alert. They basically, they're the Silver Surfer to Galactus. They help destroy worlds. Yeah. And Abby was like, okay, so they do this for a long time and then they come to Earth and it's humans that change them? I don't know. Humans are pretty shitty. And I get that. Right? That's fair. But my brain is like, but that's the Silver Surfer. That's Marvel. Every Marvel comic that has something to do with space usually comes back around to the idea that like, but humanity is special. And I know that humanity is not actually special in the real world of existence. I know, but
the United States of space.
These metaphors, they work for me. I love the journey that Phastos went from trying to help and ended up on the Manhattan Project and then seeing his work, which was like really sad and a really like pretty bold thing for Marvel to do. And then, 70 years later or whatever, he's got a family and he's got a husband and he's got a son. And I'm like, okay, I get how he could flip a 180. I buy it. And I think that Kumail's sidekick character, who's a great Indian actor, and he's been in like a million movies and TV shows and stuff. He was supposed to represent that. He was a beautiful, beautiful character. But
absolutely,
Kingo was so funny.
Analog there,
I know, Adam, you mentioned this earlier. One of the things I didn't love about the movie is that like Kingo wasn't in the final conflict because Kingo was like, I agree with Ikarus,
Peace,
so
I'm
gonna right. And it's kind of like, well, you're doing that because I understand you're juggling so many characters, and you know you need to take some players off the board for simplicity and all that stuff. I get, but I'm also like, but he should have been there, and he, you know, it's like losing Black Widow before the third act of Endgame. You're kind of like, man, it's a great sacrifice, but she should have been there on that battlefield anyway.
Right.
When the movie started and we got through the first like act of the movie or the first third of the movie, I was like, how much of this is Kumail in? Because he's barely said anything. And when the Eternals disband, that's really the first time we hear him talk. And then we go to his story. And that to me is when it really jumpstarts his participation in the movie. And honestly, like that whole sequence where they go visit him on set, they, you know, get the group back together, they're documenting, they're vlogging, all of that stuff was like some of my favorite stuff. And he's like,
this is my great grandfather. This is my grandfather.
Oh my God. That was honestly like the most genius thing.
It felt like this is where the Shang-Chi of the movie comes in, because Shang-Chi was so entertaining throughout and all the characters had that energy. And now here comes Kingo to bring in some of that energy to the rest of the proceedings.
Kumail is kind of the perfect person to do that.
Absolutely.
So good. So good. So happy for him.
Mr. Guac talks himself.
Mr. Guac. Next up, Makkari. You guys talked about how cool her powers were. She was one of the coolest characters. One of the coolest characters.
I agree.
And still, despite the fact that she was a character who was technically non-speaking, but she communicated with sign language, which was awesome. Her character even, like Adam, like you're saying, was sort of there in the beginning and then came in almost at the end, kind of, because I think, again, they didn't go straight to Makkari because Makkari and that super speed is almost too good of a problem solver. But it means like, okay, we're going to spend less time with this character. So I'm glad she lived to the end. I'd like to see more of Makkari and frankly, more of Druig, you know, in a future thing. The last one I want to talk about, Ikarus, as the last member of the fighter team. The reason I really love this movie, guys, spoiler alert, I did not see the twist coming with Ikarus at all. And
did not see that twist coming.
Because I have familiarity with the comics. Ikarus is, from what I read, like a good dude. He's like Superman. He is that level of strength, and he's supposed to be that kind of a North Star character. So when the movie did that, especially because I want to get this out of the way too. I was pretty like, really? When the first Eternal to die was Salma Hayek, right? And then the second one to die was Gilgamesh, and I'm going like, okay, this is a very diverse cast, but you just knocked out two people of color. You know, what are we doing here? Like, this is kind of a bummer. And then the movie's heroes ended up being Sersei. Ikarus, I thought was the most difficult acting job, and I thought Richard Madden did a great job. This dude was crying when he confessed to his team, when he was like, you think I like having to do this? I believe in the Celestials. I believe in their plan. And it was sad. I felt for him. When he's basically revealing he's the villain of the, and some of the criticisms have been, well, it doesn't have a very strong villain with the Deviants, or the head Deviant, who is called Crow, technically, Kro. And I'm like, he's not the villain. The Deviants are not the villains of this story. It's Ikarus. And I appreciated that. And when that happened in the movie, I didn't feel cheated for the villain side, because I was like, oh, we've been spending time with 10 characters. One of them's the villain. And that villain is going to recruit the other villain, Sprite. And those two villains are going to convince the third semi-villain, Kingo. Like, he's not in the, like, I felt that conflict. Anyway, I really appreciated that Ikarus ended up being that character, and that he maybe killed himself. You know, like, that's also something that we don't.
Unknown.
It's unknown.
Can he survive?
It's unknown. It's unknown because, you know, if this was Superman, we'd go, oh, Superman's alive, because, you know, we all know he could punch through the sun and some shit. So like, maybe he will survive. But at the end of this movie, for all intents and purposes, he killed himself because of the shame that he felt. I was like, this is fucking great. I just did not see that twist coming. How did you guys feel about Ikarus?
I wouldn't say that I necessarily saw it coming. But I think as the movie went on, there was like moments where the performance would kind of shift, and he would present himself in different ways that I started to think, there's something changing about this character. There's something happening with this character.
We were all waiting for the other shoe to drop. You know, during the movie, we're like, who is the villain? Like, this can't be all of the story.
For a while, Druig was the guy that everybody was like, oh, Druig's probably going to be the villain because in the comics.
Because he's in the comics. That's what kept my brain from,
he's being played by Barry Keoghan, who Barry Keoghan has a look that looks villainous, which is kind of a messed up thing to say, but he very much would fit the description of a villain. If you were to line all these characters up and be like, who's the bad guy? You would go, he looks a little suspect. You would not think that
Spanish,
Ikarus,
Spanish, we call that travieso. He looks like the
travieso,
the troublemaker.
But I agree. I think Richard Madden did a really good job, and I like the character of Ikarus because he has some of those shades of Superman. So when that twist happens at the end, I'm like, okay, this feels like the direction that this was probably going to go. But I liked it. I mean, I feel like it's it leans on justifying what the Celestials believe in. And I think when you've lived a life for so long and you've kind of lived at the mercy of, this hierarchy, at some point you're going to believe that what they're doing is what's best for the universe. I feel like that's just like a natural thing, and I think that's why there ends up being this conflict between these characters.
Yeah. I wasn't able to attach to the character of Ikarus until the swap happened. When that reveal happened, I was like, oh, that's why. Like, that's why this guy hasn't been giving me good vibes right from the get-go. Because, they tied in that love story with Sersei, and I never really bought into it very much because I didn't really buy the character of Ikarus as a person that I could trust right off the bat.
Plus, in the movie, they're like, he just disappeared and never spoke to Cersei for hundreds of years. And you're like, if you really loved her, loved her,
suspect. That's suspect.
He wouldn't just randomly show up in London after an earthquake.
He just always came by
to make sure you're okay. I'm like,
he always had this like cold facade to him, and I just couldn't really attach to the character. And then, like I said, when the twist and the reveal happened, I was like, that makes sense. That's why this guy was keeping his distance from me as a audience member.
Let's go to the thinkers or the people that have like magical powers and stuff. First up, Sersei, Gemma Chan. She's wonderful. I think she's perfect for the role. I think they're setting her up. I think she's going to be on the Avengers because that's what happens to Cersei while she's dating Dane Whitman, the Black Knight, the Kit Harington character. So I think both of them will have a future in the MCU that will be interesting and important. I thought that she was pretty lovely, and I felt the love that this character is supposed to have for humanity. So I thought she was great.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It was probably the strongest character in the movie, which I guess makes sense. If you end up inheriting the leadership role of the characters, then that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Gemma Chan's a star. She did really well in this role. Every scene she was in, even though there were some long exposition scenes, there was just you couldn't take your eyes off her. She was just great to watch on screen. The character of Cersei, I think she did a really good job of portraying the reluctant leader that Cersei is. Because there are moments where I did feel her anxiousness to take the role and to make the decision. And that's all credit to Gemma Chan for being able to convey that.
Yeah.
And so, I want to see more of Cersei for sure.
You will. We will. I also want to talk about the Cersei and Ikarus relationship. The MCU gives us our first sex scene, which I think is
when that happened, I was like,
people keep talking about this, and I'm like,
Marvel?
Okay.
Let me tell you why.
Because whatever, it's fine. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because it's noteworthy because that it is one of the things that it almost feels like Marvel was aware of the criticism. Because since Iron Man 1, adult movie critics are like, none of these characters ever have sex. They're sexless. There's romance in these movies, but it's all very kid-friendly, PG kind of romance, and kissing and stuff. And that's fine. But I think that Marvel was almost aware of it, but it didn't feel like they just put it in this movie just to put it in this movie. It felt like it was appropriate because it was like these two characters, they are in love and have been for thousands of years. It was a wonderful moment of, it's not just a sex scene, it is intimacy. It is actually showing intimacy between two characters. Great. Next character.
Be honest with you, I'm very surprised that they put Phastos and Ben kissing in this movie. If I'm going to be totally honest,
let me tell you.
Disney put that in the movie. I'm like, I feel like that's something that Chloe Zhao was very much like. If we don't do this, this is going to be very. I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. Just very dishonest.
Disingenuous. Dishonest. Yeah. So a couple things about that. I feel the same way. I love that moment, and I want to talk about Phastos next. Phastos kissing his husband got an applause at our screening at like the premiere. All of the movie critics, everybody applauded because it is something of. that they have not shown a kiss between, like a same-sex kiss in any of these Marvel movies after all of the different sex kisses that we've seen between all the men and women of these films. Like I talked to Chloe Zhao about it. I got to interview her for 5 minutes and brought it up, and she was like, she goes, it's something that Marvel wanted to do. It wasn't like her pitch. It was like Marvel was on it. They were aware of it. And that it is also like what the actors, it's like what was happening when they were shooting the scene. That's what it felt like. And so they did it and they shot it and then it's in the movie. And she was describing it to me where I was like, okay, it didn't seem like it was a shot on a shot list. Like a checklist. Right. Like it felt like, again, it was organic to the story and important for the story. Yeah. And here's the other thing, though. I'm going to break your heart a little bit, Adam. Apparently, the movie's not going to be released in China. But it's not because of that. It's because of Chloe Zhao coming from China when she was doing press for Nomadland, talked about how she grew up in China and it was incredibly repressive. So the Chinese government, doing what the Chinese government does, was like, okay, well, we're not going to show any Chloe Zhao movies ever, to keep that misinformation going. And it's a shame. And I wonder if that wasn't the case, and if Eternals was opening in China, one of the few movies that is able to make it through, if Marvel would have kept it, if we would have heard stories that it would open in China, but that scene that shot is cut out because like they did that with Star Wars, Disney did it with Star Wars, and it's frustrating and it's bullshit. And I just wish that Marvel or a company like Disney would turn down literally millions and hundreds of millions of dollars to make a point, to be like, look, if you're not going to open this movie the way it is, you're not going to get our movie. I think that would be great, but I don't know when that's ever going to happen, and that sucks. But it was a beautiful moment. I'm very happy it's in the movie.
And their kid is adorable.
I agree. Yeah, that kid is absolutely another scene stealer, man. That kid was great. I agree with all your sentiments. Adam called Phastos Donatello, and I was like, yes, that's exactly who he is. The Donatello.
I think Brian Tyree Henry was really good at selling the physical, actual like construction of what he was doing. I think Robert Downey was so good at that in the Iron Man movies, of just like taking all the pieces apart and putting it back together. And so it was kind of interesting getting to see another character do it. And he does it in such a nice, fluid way. And I don't know, it was just very like pleasing to the eye to watch him construct, steam engines and all these like different weapons and all these things. And I think he's also a character who does carry a lot of weight on his shoulders, because he, for better or for worse, is responsible for a lot of the advancement of humanity. And him and Druig and some of the other characters, they're kind of at odds of like, well, maybe we advanced them too much. Maybe we've given them too much power.
Yeah.
Now
where's that line?
Yeah, exactly. Now they're committing genocide. And so I think they were having a lot of very interesting conversations about their powers and what they represent, and what something like the ability to create and to evolve, basically passing that on to other civilizations. Like, what does that mean for them? So there were some really, really cool moments, interesting moments with that character. That I thought
Did you guys see? Did you guys see at the premiere, Brian Tyree Henry? He said, because he was asked, everybody asked all these actors, what other Marvel character do you want to meet? He said that he believes, it's his headcanon, that Phastos helped Wakandans develop a lot of their tech. Thousands of years ago. And I'm like, that's dope. And he said he would like to meet the entire Dora Milaje. And I was like, yeah, I want to see that. That was so awesome. But that's so cool to think that these characters have been there from the beginning. I remember, I forgot which one, but one of the characters said that they knew Thor or something when he was a little kid.
Kingo. That was Kingo.
And he's like, now he won't return my calls.
He used to follow me around all the time.
Yeah, that's right.
Return my calls. Yeah, that was a good moment.
I want to see some of that shit. I want to see some flashbacks and stuff. Druig. Great actor, interesting character. He's distant. He's distant.
Yes, Cynthia was
but I think that's by design.
Miller.
I almost feel like he is almost a red herring in the movie, right? To make you think maybe he's behind it all, and then it ends up being Ikarus.
His power is to literally control people. Of course, you're going to think that that's the bad guy, because usually any character that's associated with some sort of mind manipulation or mind control, 9 times out of 10, they're the bad guy.
It was Agatha all along, you guys. It was Agatha all along.
That's right.
It was Agatha. And some of the stuff he was saying, I also was like, this is pretty good writing, because I agree with him. Like some of the stuff, I was like, Druig, you're not wrong, dude.
Yeah, I think Druig is an outsider. Because he's so aware of his power set and how it works and the type of ramifications that it can have on societies or people. He's very aware of that. So I think him being the character who kind of pushes back and says like, well, why are we doing this? What's the purpose of this? You just told me what our real intention is, but you're asking me to do something without me being able to even process what you just told me. So I think there's like a lot of interesting layers and conflict to that character. And I honestly, throughout a lot of the movie, I was like, he's not necessarily wrong. And are they using this as a vehicle to then reveal that he's going to be the main villain of the story? It would have worked for me, but the fact that he actually ends up, helping them was really,
what it gets
cool.
You know what gets me excited about is I want to see that the storytellers and the writers that Marvel Studios hire to do a new Magneto Charles Xavier, because that shit's going to be fire, dude. You know that Marvel has gotten really smart at doing supervillain, superhero ethical discussions. Right? When these characters talk about ethics, it's very like even the Netflix Daredevil and Punisher scene from season 2 of Daredevil, like that's like the best part of that show, dude. So I can't wait for that. Next, Sprite is that actress did a great job. And I think
I hated Sprite so much, man.
I think I was like, I hope they don't do the thing like they do in Interview with a Vampire that Kirsten Dunst played this little girl who was turned into a vampire in that movie in the 90s. The fact that when you're an adult brain in a little kid body and you're eternal, you're immortal, that you will inevitably go evil or go mad because of course that would drive you insane. And they kind of did it, but then they kind of backed away from it. And then they solved the problem where I was like, well, how are you going to have this actress come back and play this character? At the end of the movie, they're like, you're human now. I'm like, that's very convenient. That's very nice. You can bring the actress back. I thought she did a great job. She was not my favorite character because the story necessitated that this character was going to be a cog. She's kind of annoying. She was kind of
I really disliked that this character was in this movie. I don't like the fact that they glossed over the fact that she stabbed Sersei and they were okay at the end. Like, I don't care how long I've known you guys. Hector, if you stab me, bro, there's gonna be beef for years, dog. Like
someone's gonna get chunked in the ass.
You know it, bro. You know it. You know you shouldn't have stabbed me, but you stabbed me. There's beef.
But when it comes to Eternals, is a stabbing equivalent to me like poking you with a paperclip and me being like, "Ha, take that, man." Like, I don't know.
Who knows?
Okay.
Who knows? Because she was pretty hurt, right?
I mean, despite Cersei turning that dagger into water, you stab me, we're done.
Yeah, she was hurting. Yeah. So that's one of the things that really frustrates me with this movie is that they made her character switch dependent on something that we didn't spend a lot of time on. So she wanted to be a part of humanity. She wanted to feel and age and grow, which is amazing, which is a great reason for somebody reasons for somebody to do something. But the fact that we spent zero time exploring that, but she used that reason to stab Sersei, I'm like, nah, bro. No. You're not using this character in the correct way. She should have been cut completely out of the movie. I'm sorry, but that's there could have been some characters who were just cut, and there was
Yeah,
like Adam is saying, maybe we meet other Eternals later, kind of a thing.
Exactly. The first half of the team was presented.
I liked the symmetry of having 5 and 5 and having it being 10 characters, and I liked all that stuff. But I agree. I think that some characters unfortunately got the short stick, and I think Sprite was one of them. Here's another one. This is maybe my least favorite thing about the movie. Can we talk about it? Ajak.
Yeah,
I really liked Ajak. I did not like how she was killed. That made me sad. I was frustrated by that. She was done a little dirty.
It was another dude pushing a lady off a cliff, and I was like, here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go, guys. Here we go again.
The difference is that she was able to get up and take a shotgun and fight some of the Deviants, and then she was killed. And so, but basically, it is similar to the Black Widow and Gamora deaths. Yeah. And she was still like, it's interesting because she was dead near the beginning of the movie. And then I was like, oh, this movie's a murder mystery. Who killed an Eternal? How did this happen? Okay, I get it. I get that that's part of what this movie is. But I was also like, man, I wanted Salma Hayek to like be in Marvel movies, plural. And I think that role is going to go to Angelina Jolie in terms of a like veteran actress who is so good at acting, super smart, has an awesome career, family person, also gorgeous human being beyond, like, I was like, I wanted also Salma to do that, but it's going to be Angelina. And it felt like she was still a presence throughout the movie. And I thought that the flashback where she's on the ranch, because remember when she's killed and she's a body, I was like, wait a minute, there's some shit in a trailer that we haven't seen yet where she's on her little horse on the ranch. And that was later with a flashback when it was like, when it was like a week ago and she's talking to Ikarus.
Yeah.
So she still felt a presence throughout. Don't get me wrong. And I liked her. I think her performance, I think having Salma Hayek, there's a world where maybe Salma and Angelina could almost have swapped roles. Could Salma Hayek have played Thena? Maybe, but she's not as I don't think as a physical of an actor as Angelina is and has been. Angelina has done stunt shit before. She's Tomb Raider. But I also think that Salma had such a commanding presence and she has such an authoritative voice that when she's talking to the Celestial, I was like, cool, this works. This works. But I'm just sad that she died. I don't know. How'd you guys feel about it?
You're right. Accent. I could have just had a movie with her for 2 hours. I've been good.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
man.
no,
Me too.
I feel like they really you're right, Hector. They made their choice as to who was going to continue their legacy in the MCU. Unfortunately, it was not Selma. I feel like they kind of underutilized her amazing performances too by kind of subduing her. But you're right. I think she did do the most that she could do with this role by using her voice to really command the scenes that she was in. She wasn't like when Ikarus grabbed her and was about to throw her off the cliff, she was still trying to be kind and compassionate to him and say, dude, you don't need to do this. She didn't get physical. And I felt every ounce of leadership and compassion and love that she has to try to convince him otherwise, you know? And so I think only an actor like Salma Hayek could do something like that, which I think was great, but I really am disappointed that we're not going to see her in future installments.
It's interesting because the character in the comics is a male character. And Salma was saying, I'm playing this character who was a man in the comics and I am a Latina and I am middle-aged and I am an action hero. You know, I'm not somebody's mother or grandmother. And she was saying, Salma Hayek said that her mom, when she found out that she was going to be cast in a Marvel movie, or maybe Salma believed it herself, that like Marvel was trying to reach out to her, that she was like, oh, I'm not interested because I don't want to play the mom of a superhero. Like she thought she was going to be like Marissa Tomei in Spider-Man or something like that. And I love that feeling. And yet she's kind of the mom of all the Eternals. So I think that by changing the character from a male character to a female character, I think there was inherently a motherly quality that came out, which I thought was beautiful because Salma Hayek is a mom. Like that's part of her humanity. And it came through, but it's like, it's interesting how Angelina gets to be, you know, the action hero with like no attachments other than Gilgamesh. And Salma is going to be the motherly, kind of the Latina energy, motherly thing. And I'm like, it's all valid. I'm not mad at it, but it just made me want more variety with that type of actor going forward. If Salma is going to be the mom of all the Eternals and have that energy, then I want to see a future movie where we just have a middle-aged Latina superhero who's like not the mom energy. You know what I mean? So, so that was also an interesting part of the film. And again, my least favorite part is that Salma Hayek died because I just want to see Salma Hayek in these movies more.
We need more excellence in these movies, you guys.
I want more Salma Hayek, but not in Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard.
Right. But here's the good news too. Here's the good news.
Or something.
It was only her and Gilgamesh who died and Ikarus. Literally, this is the most recent movie in the MCU. So if they ever did a flashback with anything from here to the beginning of the MCU to the beginning of time, Salma Hayek could be in it. So so you know, if we get a similar storytelling approach in Eternals 2 or whatever, they could still populate the movie with flashbacks and we could still see, you know, Salma and Gilgamesh and they should bring those actors back and that would be tight. The Celestials were cool, kind of mind-blowing. They were fucking huge.
Holy shit, man. That last scene where it takes Sersei, I was like, if we saw something like that, Christ.
And I think they did a really good job of conveying how big they are. Like really, really
then
good
when
job.
it like goes back into deep space, it like goes through a black hole and I'm like, those things could f up so bad and we don't even realize it.
It's like, are they a threat to Galactus? I'm like, maybe. Like I think they're a level above Galactus. I think Galactus is here because Galactus is more physical and he's like, no, my only job is I go from planet to planet and eat it. That's it.
Yeah.
But the Celestials are like, we create Celestials from a egg and it is born through a planet and we create the stars and you're like, holy shit.
I feel like that whole concept, that whole plot, it requires like so much lifting. That's kind of why when we're talking about the non-spoiler section, I'm almost like, I feel like this could have been 2 movies. I feel like the first movie could have just been the history of the Eternals and everything that they've done up to this point in the MCU. Then the second half of the first movie is about, okay, what is their purpose? Like, what's happening? And then assembling the team, and then having characters.
For the story.
Yeah, and then having some of these deviants be like the main threat. And then in the second movie, focus on, this is actually what your real purpose is on Earth. Ikarus is the villain. We're going to birth this celestial from Earth and destroy it. And now you have to try to figure out how to stop it. It's a lot.
I will say it is. I will say maybe Marvel, and I have no idea, but maybe they in their decision making, because you were saying earlier, Adam, maybe it should have been a Disney Plus show. Did y'all see how just today, I think on Twitter, James Gunn was saying, oh, actually, initially, they wanted me to do shorts, like a Marvel one-shot for each Guardian of the Galaxy, and put it in front of a movie until we got to Guardians of the Galaxy so that audiences would meet these characters before that movie. He even shot a little thing with Rocket and Groot, to be one of these one-shots, and then they all scrapped it, and he decided not to do it because he's like, I just want to focus on the movie. It's too much.
Yeah.
And I believe that the reason they didn't do what you're saying, Adam, they looked at it and they went, the Disney Plus shows right now are really like showing different sides of characters that we already know. And even Miss Marvel is going to make a jump to the movies. And so we're going to spend time with Kamala Khan. And maybe they looked at it and they're like, we want Eternals to be big movie characters. We want these characters and what they're doing to impact the big movie world. Because frankly, are we going to see a lot of the impact and fallout from the Falcon and the Winter Soldier in the MCU? Probably not. Are we going to see fallout from WandaVision other than what happened to Wanda? I don't know. Are we going to see fallout of Loki? I think so, because it's all timeline shenanigans that we're seeing.
That show definitely has some sort of an impact.
Yeah. But again, Falcon Winter Soldier, with its focus on, it's very character based and what these 2 guys are going through in their characters and stuff. I think that they looked at it and they went, we just want audiences to go to this one movie. Yes, it'll be a long movie, but we're going to do it all in one. So one and done. And maybe it is a little separated from the MCU. In fact, Chloe Zhao said that she, as a Marvel fan, was trying to be like, oh, should we bring in this character? Should we bring in this character? Should we bring in this idea? But that Kevin Feige and producer Nate Moore, they were the ones to be like, no, we want to separate. We want to take a step back after the Infinity Saga, take a breath, and have audiences just meet these characters in just this story. And one thing that I think I'm a little kind of let down with the movie, even though I really loved it, is that after the Celestial almost comes through the fucking Earth at the end of the movie, there's no response from the rest of the planet. And I feel like if this movie was its own,
Adam and I were talking about,
if this movie was its own sci-fi movie, there would be a whole resolution, a whole falling action of like, ladies and gentlemen, we can't believe we're seeing that. We'd see news, we'd see other people around the world respond. We would see how that would impact the world. But again, it feels like Marvel is being like, hold on that. We're going to get to that later. And I know we will, but there's still a side of me that's like, I would have liked to have seen more other than just Kit Harington touching a sword. Like, or them walking in the park being like, I guess you're an Eternal now. I guess so. Oh, I'm being called to space. It's like, I'm like, this is so chill and calm for what just happened. You guys are having that conversation too.
Yeah, we were having that conversation.
The moment we left the theater, we were having that conversation.
Totally. Yeah, because it seems like, in the past, it's obviously evolved, right? Because in the first Avengers movie, that's all it is. It's literally just those Avengers. Every superpowered being that we know of up to that point is in that battle. And then it gets bigger and bigger and it evolves and evolves. And once we get to Endgame, obviously, all those characters are involved in that battle. So it's understood why you don't get that sort of stuff. But I know in the past, there have been some of those movies where we're like, if this is like really earth-shattering shit, wouldn't Cap show up? Like, wouldn't other... And I mean, okay, what characters could have realistically shown up in this movie? Thor, but he's off with the Guardians. Captain Marvel, she's in deep space. I understand why we would have those conversations. And it also kind of depends on like where exactly this movie takes place in terms of the present timeline.
I have to imagine Eternals is the most recent. And I think that Shang-Chi takes place before Spider-Man Far From Home, because that is a cliffhanger that leads right into Spider-Man No Way Home. And I think that's going to lead right into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And after Doctor Strange's events in Spider-Man, that's when Shang-Chi takes place, because Doctor Strange isn't there. It's only Wong. I think that's purposeful. I think that Wong being the only guy in Shang-Chi to show up and not Stephen Strange means that maybe Shang-Chi is happening at the same time as the Doctor Strange movie, or after, or he's gone. So I mean, like, you guys are right. Like, it would have been cool to see other characters respond and react. even at the end of Shang-Chi, the way that like Bruce Banner and Carol Danvers were like, welcome to the circus, man. Like, okay, these rings are crazy. See you later. Yeah. There's no response from other characters about like, there's a celestial hand and half a head sticking out of the Pacific Ocean. Yeah. So we'll see it, and I'm excited about it. The Black Knight stuff is hopefully going to be really cool. I think it was cool. They got Kit Harington. That's just a seed planting.
I don't know anything about that character, but I'm 100% convinced that the character who he was talking to was Uatu the Watcher.
I mean, maybe, man. Here's the deal with his character.
It definitely was not Nick Fury. Because we had people come out and like, was that Nick Fury? And I'm like, that sounded like Jeffrey Wright to me.
Yeah.
Here's the deal too. His character, Dane Whitman, is the descendant of someone who was, I think, on like Arthur's Round Table, like a medieval knight. And he was the original Black Knight. And he had something called the Ebony Blade, which again, in the movie earlier, it's name dropped. And Thena goes, no, it's not. It's Excalibur or something, like just to let you know, like the Ebony Blade is a famous fake sword in this world. Yeah. And in the comics, the modern day Dane Whitman, or Kit Harington's character, he is contacted by the ghost of his ancestor. Like he comes through and talks to him and tells him, you got to be the new Black Knight, almost like an Obi-Wan. And I think there's even there's versions of the Black Knight story where Dane Whitman straight up talks to Merlin himself, the wizard. So like maybe they got cool. I don't know if they cast an actor to play either of these roles. I don't know if we're saying Jeffrey Wright and Sam Jackson because the actor sounded black or African American or like Jeffrey Wright Black British guy.
Because we spent the last 8 weeks watching What If, and he's in the like I know him from the Bond
Did he have
movies.
a British accent? No. Did he have a British accent or an American accent?
No.
Then what the hell? So
that's my thing is like, we just had the Batman trailer. We heard him say some stuff in there. He's in 007. He's in What If. And I'm like, that sounded too much like Uatu the Watcher to me.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong.
I mean, they could also make Merlin the Wizard like have an American accent. We've seen fun takes on these characters from mythology before. So like, I'm excited. I just think it's cool. Also, Harry Styles is in the movie as Star Fox, which is nuts. And Patton Oswalt was Pip the Troll. Oh, you guys don't know about this character?
I mean, I know about the post credits because it was spoiled for me on Twitter, but yeah.
This mid credit scene is wild because Patton Oswalt comes back to the MCU after playing multiple characters. He plays multiple characters in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but that's probably not canon. So Patton is Pip the Troll, which is hilarious. Pip the Troll is a character usually associated with Adam Warlock. So it's, this was a character who fans were, I think maybe it's a little too on the nose and maybe it was a little typecasting, but they were like, oh, this is who Peter Dinklage is going to play. Or in Infinity War. That is not who Peter Dinklage played, thankfully, which is great. But people thought he was going to play Pip. Patton Oswalt, perfect casting. He's just this drunk guy who can teleport. That's basically it. He's like super, super powerful, but he's basically this fun-loving drunk guy. Eros, aka Star Fox, is a very interesting character. I don't know too much about him, but here's what I do know about him. He's involved in a storyline in Marvel Comics history where he maybe uses his powers, which are like super pheromones, to get like the opposite sex to be attracted to him. He maybe uses those powers to sleep with a woman character, and then the comic books kind of say like that wasn't really consensual, and then other male Avengers like don't really get on Eros's case about it, like, and that's part of the controversy is that this female character was like, what the hell, you guys, like, why aren't you backing me up on this? So I think that the same way they avoided Hank Pym hitting his wife Janet, you'll never see that in the movies. That's never going to be addressed. They barely touched on Tony Stark's alcoholism, but there's a reference of, moment of clarity or whatever, like he's sober in later in the movies. I think we're never going to see that storyline. And I think in an effort to avoid any of that, they got an actor who like most women on earth love, who is Harry Styles. They got this young heartthrob. Like they got a guy who is dating Olivia Wilde. I don't know what this guy's deal is. He's a musician. He's incredibly famous. And I don't know shit about Harry Styles. So when he came up on screen, y'all, at my screening, people were like cheering like, woo, like that. And I was like, Okay. All right. So
Marvel fan base is about to get really young.
Which, you know, they know what they're doing. They're getting Haley Steinfeld and as Kate Bishop. Like, they know what they're doing.
Us fuckers are getting old.
So hopefully this character, Star Fox, which I don't think they're going to use, I think they're going to call him Eros, brother of Thanos. They're going to reveal how he's related to Thanos in the movies. They're going to reveal where he was. They're going to reveal what kind of character he is. And hopefully he's fun. And hopefully we like him, which would be a little bit different to. I mean,
if you're lost in the styles, come on.
Yeah.
It's like getting Jason Momoa to play Aquaman because they were they were doing we have to make Aquaman seem cool thing.
Yeah.
So they got Jason Momoa, who's one of the coolest humans that's walking around right now. So that was pretty wild, and I did not see that coming. And it definitely gave me the feelings of when we saw Sam Jackson as Nick Fury at the end of the first, because you're like, I know that actor. Oh, this is perfect. The character he's playing. But I don't think Eros is as important as Nicholas Fury. So whatever, it's fine.
Nicholas Fury, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool. Again, we're entering a phase into the Marvel stuff where me, as somebody who did not grow up reading Marvel comics, it doesn't matter if you put Harry Styles or if you put Matt Damon I'm like, I don't know anything about Thanos' brother. So to me, this is just like, okay, it's a new character. You know?
Yeah.
So I don't have that excitement from a comic book lover, from a lover of Harry Styles, because I never listened to One Direction.
This character is kind of a deep cut though, Adam, so don't feel bad.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely don't. But you know, whether it's a fan of the character or a fan of the actor, I'm like, I'm gonna wait and see what happens.
Sure, I'll take it. Fun fact, when I was growing my hair long, Harry Styles is the person I was modeling my hair after. Realizing because he has great long hair for a dude. And so I was like, yeah, I want hair like him. But then I realized how much it would take to get hair like him. I was like, yeah, I don't want it that bad.
The amount of money that's in that hair.
A lot of work, buddy. A lot of work to be had.
But your guys' hair looks so great anyway. Y'all look so great. Anyway, I liked Eternals. I can't wait to watch it again. I think it's a movie that is also deserving of a revisit. Definitely different viewing experience the second time I see it. You know, so I'm looking forward to
Hector,
that.
I want you to give us your opinion after you watch Dune. Watch Dune, and
I can't wait.
Can talk about it on the podcast. We'll talk about it on the podcast and see how you feel a little bit differently after watching the Dune.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the interesting thing about this movie is I think for a Marvel movie, it is quite different in terms of the story it presents, the characters it builds out, how it does all these things, and I think that is absolutely a product of Chloe Zhao's directing talent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nomadland, I mean, just any of her movies. Like I love Nomadland. I think it's really, really good. But I know what type of audience the majority of Marvel audiences are. I know that they would look at Nomadland and be like, this is not my speed. And I think
here's the thing too.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I want to say real quick too, is that I feel like every time a Marvel movie comes out, the expectation is like, is it the best Marvel movie ever made? Is it everyone's new favorite character?
Exactly.
And I'm kind of like, that's not how Marvel Comics operates.
That's not how movies
I think Marvel
work.
Comics, that's not how movies work, but especially even though they're all part of the same series, technically, I don't think that the Iron Man movies were trying to outdo the Thor movies, were trying to outdo the Captain America movies. They made movies with each other, characters, and different people are going to have different favorites. So this movie's going to come out, and I don't think it's the best Marvel movie, and I don't think it's going to be everyone's favorite Marvel movie, but I think a lot of people are going to watch this movie, and a lot of kids are going to watch this movie and go, that's my favorite character.
Totally.
And that's awesome because this movie is beautiful, it's well done, it's emotional, it has great messages in it, and it's diverse. There's going to be deaf kids watching this movie. And they're going to be, you know what I mean? Like that level of like, I could start crying thinking about that shit. There's going to be gay kids that watch this movie and see themselves other places, but to see themselves in this world, a kiss, just a kiss. There's going to be South Asian kids that watch this, Pakistani kids like Kumail. They're going to see, there's going to be Indian kids that watch this. Like that is so, so great. So Eternals are going to be a lot of people's favorite characters, but it's not going to be everybody's. And that's okay. That's Marvel, baby.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's what's so special about movies is like it's and not that it's uncommon, but it's not as common that the two people have the exact same experience or love or compassion or deep sort of like I don't know, just whatever love for the movie. I mean, everyone has different feelings and experiences going into a movie. Like we talked about on the podcast, American Ninja Warrior. it's a silly movie, but like our
American Ninja, get it right.
American Ninja, sorry.
American Ninja.
Our background going into those movies is different from Augustine's. Same thing for me in Halloween, for you guys. You know, like we all have that thing. So of course there's going to be people who are going to walk out of Eternals and be like, I love this movie and here's why. And I think that's just as valid as our love for other Marvel movies.
Agreed.
Forever.
All right, boys, let's wrap it up. Wrap it up.
But guys, thank you so much for watching. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Eternals? What are some of your takeaways? What were some of your favorite characters and or moments? Maybe some Easter eggs that we might have missed, because I'm sure there probably was some stuff that someone like me, who's maybe not as experienced as Marvel Comics, might find some stuff. Let us know in the comments below. Check out our new podcast, Chexicans. It's on the channel. It's also on Spotify and iTunes. And we'll see you guys in the next review. Bye.